Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Florida in the US by Jim Gale. Thank you so much, Jim, for being here. Such a pleasure to be able to reconnect and to have this time for this wonderful conversation. So for everybody that is listening and watching us, can you share about you, your story? Who's Jim?
Oh, that sounds good, my friend Brian. You know, just before we started, you said, go deep on this one. Like you wanted me to expand. Normally, I keep the Jim part out of it and I go right into the solutions part. But since you asked me, there are many relevant things that have happened in my life to lead me to the understanding that I have now about what's happening in the world, which is what's happening within myself. And, you know, I grew up, they called me Nature Boy. I had one magazine subscription in my whole life, and it was Ranger Rick. I had pictures of animals on my wall. I have always loved nature and everything to do with her. And I guess the next relevant piece is that comes to mind, I was about 14 or 15 years old. And I had heard about the concept of enlightenment. I didn't know anything other than I heard about this concept. And I remember I was walking through the hallway near the wrestling room. I was a wrestler in high school. And there was this little game we used to play where if the clasp of a chain or a necklace was here, you make a wish, right? We did a lot of things around making a wish. And I said, I wish to be enlightened. And interestingly, I probably did that many, many times. I have no idea how many. A lot of times we did that. But that particular time, I have a clear memory of everything around me. I can see the green walkway and the red walls, and I can see the doors, and everything was just a moment of clarity in my life for some reason. And anyways, go forward a little bit. I didn't like school much at all. I was a daydreamer through high school and through college. In fact, the only reason I got C's, I got A's in gym and I did pretty good in sciences, but everything else, I just got C's. And I did so I could wrestle because wrestling was important to me. And, you know, one of the things that I like to share with people regarding this label of ADD, if that label would have been around when I was in high school, then I'm certain that I would have been labeled ADD because I did not pay attention. And when I look back on ADD, I consider it one of my greatest gifts. What was happening in my mind was way more exciting than what was happening in the front of the room. Mm-hmm. I was daydreaming about life, right? And what I'd rather be doing than sitting in that classroom. So we go forward a few years, and I had some good years in high school. And then my senior year, I was rated, or my junior year, actually, I was rated first in state in the state tournament. And it was the state finals. And I was wrestling a guy that I had wrestled 5 times in a row. And I had a bad feeling. And anyway, he beat me. And it was the only one. I beat him 5 times in a row. It was the only one that really counted. It was the state finals. And I went through a tough period. My senior year then, I didn't even place. My freshman year in college was just chaos and no fun. And then I got to Mankato, Minnesota, where another major event in my life happened. Our college wrestling coach told all the students, or all the wrestlers, you have to have your goals written and on my desk by Monday. And this was Friday. And if you don't, you can't wrestle. Well, I had to wrestle because that was my identity at the time. So I was a procrastinator. So I threw the sheet on my desk and I went and partied all weekend, and it was nagging me is the pen and paper, right? I never really, until after that, I never really liked the pen and paper. But anyway, Sunday night came along and I started reading the questions on the goal sheet. Questions like, what is the best you think you can do? And it started with the big picture goal. And this is so important for our world today, for individuals, everybody listening. Do you have an inspiring vision, an empowering vision for your own life, that of your family, and then beyond that? And anyway, I started reading these questions and something switched inside my head. And I started imagining myself for the first time, really. I started imagining myself 4 years from now, back then, right? So I was 19 years old and I imagined what's it going to be like when I'm graduating college and how will I have done as a wrestler, especially. There were things about grades. I just sloughed those off. I still didn't care about that. But as a wrestler, I started dreaming. And I started writing crazy things, crazy according to the coach and everybody else. I wrote that I wanted to be a 3-time All-American and a national wrestling champion. And when I handed the goals back to my coach on Monday, he smirked and he sat back and he said, these goals are kind of lofty, don't you think? And he was implying that it was impossible for me to reach those goals. He even said, goals are meant to be something that you can achieve, kind of on the outside of what's possible, but still within the realm of what's possible. And this isn't possible, Jim. Right? So I smiled and I said, Coach, I think I can do it. Because in my mind, in my spirit, in my soul, I'd already done it. I'd already imagined it, and I was already inspired. The flame was lit. And so 4 years later, I actually ended up being a 4-time All-American national champ, inducted into the Hall of Fame, thanks to creating that inspired vision. And another massive catalyst for this was I was in a network marketing company. And we were driving to Texas from Minnesota for one of those rah-rah events. And somebody had the Dennis Waitley series, The Psychology of Winning, and they put it in the cassette player. And the whole way to Texas and the whole way back, we are listening to Dennis Waitley talk about what he has learned as an Olympic coach about the psychology of achievement. And by the way, this was also right before I wrote my goals. I listened to this, which shaped my belief about myself. And that changed my life. And so ever since then, and this is such an opportunity for everybody listening, I have not listened to the radio in the car since then. I use the car time as the best education time I can have, listening to inspiring and empowering content. And anyway, so that's a little bit of a start about how I got into this idea of enlightenment and consciousness. And then I'll share one more thing, and then we can keep going on new questions if you want. But it's this idea that came to me from the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill was commissioned to study the most successful manifestors, entrepreneurs, and business people in the world. And after a lifetime of study, he deducted that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Now, this was consistent with Dennis Waitley. It was consistent with all of these teachers that I had been learning from. And so if that's true, and who am I to argue with, Napoleon Hill or Dennis Waitley? They made a lifetime studying this, and I was a young kid. So I said, okay, then, if that's true, then what's possible? And I let go of all belief systems, all limitations for myself. And now we're intent on changing the world.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I often find our life stories so interesting because our lives go through a lot of different pathways, and there are certain moments, as you were just saying, that there are certain moments that stand out and that they can create the direction. And I love that idea of having a vision. For me, as I often share with a lot of people, especially around, like when I'm talking with people around climate change and climate action, I often ask, what's your vision of the future? Not what you want to change. What's your vision of the future? Because I realize that most people have no idea the direction, because, as you say, like we have these beliefs, and we know perhaps what's happening now is not how I want it to be. But if we don't know how it can be, then how can we get there? And I love that you share that. And yes, like for everybody listening, like what's your vision? And even if, as you said with your coach, something that other people might think it's not achievable, it's like, well, why think small? So thank you for sharing that. And I want to get, Jim, a little bit forward in your life. What was the catalyst for you to start what you're doing now with the food forest abundance? Like, how did you go from being like a wrestler and having that particular like experience in life to then reconnecting with what you shared about your childhood, about being the nature boy?
Yeah. Yeah. And since you were just talking about visions for the future, I think it's the perfect time to share my vision, and then I'll backtrack a teeny bit and then we'll go forward again. But the ultimate lie that has been told to humanity is the lie of fear and scarcity. The lie that the earth will not provide enough for us. That is so easy to see once we start practicing abundance and faith and courage and joy and service. The vision then, if to explain and to share my vision for the future, if the truth is that whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, then let's go for it. What is the highest ideal that anybody out there listening can imagine for themselves, their friends, their family, and our world? The highest ideal that I can imagine is enlightenment. It's the Garden of Eden. It's a place of magical, wonderful abundance everywhere. And then, so that's my ideal. I imagine food forests everywhere, walking around HOA communities, and everywhere, all over the place, things are just dripping with food. Every bush is a raspberry, a blueberry, a blackberry, a functional plant designed into our landscape in a way that serves everything, that serves life, right? And to get to the contrast of that, there are 44 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. And that takes more poisons, more human resources, more pesticides than any other crop, and it doesn't provide food. The lawn is the problem. The solution is so easy. It's turning that lawn into a food forest. So then back to kind of the gap there, it was 2007. And actually, I'll go back a touch more. I was 29, about to turn 30, and I'm 53 now. And I was broke. I was traveling the world. I was backpacking around the world on a backpacker's budget, living with the Maasai in the Masai Mara in Tanzania. I was in Chiang Mai. I was all over, even Karachi, Pakistan, and Indonesia, all over. And I learned about people. I was so curious. I love people. I love cultures. And it was so amazing going to these different places and seeing how different people lived. And we all have the same general wants and desires and needs, right? Love, family, basic needs, support, community, all these wonderful things. And when I was traveling, I went to Australia. I went to Surfers Paradise, Australia. I bought a car and I started driving on the other side of the road from here, right in the middle of Sydney. There was a big Coke sign back then, and it was right in the corner of one of the busiest places. And that's where I said, "Hey, I'll meet you right there to pick up the car and pay for it." And I started following a taxi cab around on the other side of the road. Anyway, I just started driving north up the east coast of Australia and stopping at all these different towns. I had a backpack in the back of the car, and I just was literally just going whichever way felt best at the moment. So I just stopped in places, and then I ended up in Surfer's Paradise. And I was in that transitional period. Previous to that, I was in Hawaii for 4 years running a bar. So I started writing my goals again and conceiving, what do I want to do next? And what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring what I had learned about life from Dennis Waitley and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and all these great teachers. I wanted to bring that to humanity, to the masses. And so I wrote my goals again. And one of my goals was to be retired. I was dead broke at the time. So I wanted to be retired in 3 years with $3 million. I got home, and this is happening to a lot of people. I got home to Minnesota after this trip, and I was living with two of my buddies from high school and through college. And they were both engineers. They just got done, with their educations, and now they were finding jobs in the market. And they're engineer-minded, logical-minded people, good friends. And we were having a beer on a Friday night, and I was sharing with them my goals that I had written. And one of the guy just shook his head and laughed at me like I was a complete nut and idiot. And the other guy, his name was Pete, he got pissed off. He was literally mad at me. He's like, Jim, you're just an idiot. And it was interesting how my goals could make him mad, right? So anyway, I got just through a series of divine circumstances, I got involved in the mortgage business. And a guy said, you can come work for my company. I don't pay any salary, but it's 100% commission based. So I worked for him for about 3 or 4 months, and I was energized, and I was out and I was bringing in leads, and he couldn't close any of the leads. So then I went to work for another guy, and the other fella could close all the leads. Well, I found out within a few months that he was doing it the shystery way, right? So I quit that company, then went to another company. So in 11 months, I worked at 3 companies, and I learned everything about how I wanted to do it, because I didn't know anything about the business, but I knew that I didn't want to do it that way. So we created our own model. And then I opened up my own business 11 months in, and within 3.5 years, we did $1.3 billion in revenue. And it was an amazing, explosive growth. We basically changed the industry in Minnesota and then went to 10 states. And I then got bored with that industry, because my ultimate goal was to change the world. My ultimate goal was to bring emotional intelligence to every school in the country. So I left. I just put the business in the hands of a friend of mine, and I went and bought a boat, and I lived on the ocean for about 9 months. And I started writing goals again. And it was such an amazing experience. But that's kind of the transition. And then it came to 2007, and that's when I learned 3 things. I learned that the world is controlled by people who are the poison producers of our world, the people that are like parasites, the corporations, the entities that are sucking the energy out of our system. And they're using that energy to create narratives that are simply false, like scarcity. And they're using that narrative to create poisons and to create things like population control and all that. So at the same time, I had my first 2 daughters. And that's when I actually went into a scarcity mindset, because I didn't see a path. I didn't see the Garden of Eden. I didn't see a peaceful world. I saw a world that was being radically destroyed and rapidly destroyed. And so I went into a scarcity mindset. I had a lot of money, started studying the problem every day for 12 hours a day. For actually years, I studied the problem. And then I read Bill Mollison's quote. Bill Mollison is the founder of permaculture, which is the solution to all the world's biggest problems. And it's demonstratable too. It's not a hypothetical, it's a fact. And his quote was, though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, The solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And I started to bawl. And from that moment forward, I started focusing more on the solution than the problem. And that led me to about 2.5 years ago. I was still in a scarcity mindset to a smaller degree, but I actually went from 20 million to negative $80,000. I invested everything I had into the question, how do we bring these solutions to humanity? And then about 30 months ago, I was at the end of my rope. I had bills to pay. I had a family to feed. And I stepped into the frequency, the energy of faith and courage. I was listening to another kind of the secret type of thing, another law of attraction thing, and integrating that into what I knew. And I remember the step I took when I let go of the last bit of fear and stepped fully into faith and consciousness and presence. And everything since then has been a divine, magical ride.
Wow. Wow. Again, like, thank you for sharing that. I feel like there's in this that you're sharing, like, that where we're placing our mind, where we're placing our attention, where our awareness is going, that is where the energy is flowing. And I often share, like, with all of my students, with all of my clients, about how we see things, what are we bringing into our awareness, what we're feeding both physically and mentally and energetically, who we're surrounding ourselves with. And as you're saying, there is a place of the solutions. Like, and every time for me, like, I resonate so much with part of your story in terms of, trying to go and travel and discover different people, discover different cultures, discover different ways of thinking, and to be able to understand, we, as you're saying, we have the same basic needs, yet we're all going about it slightly different. We are all unique. Every culture is slightly unique. So everything, and for me, all throughout the time, it's been about discovering that and being able to incorporate different things into my life. And for me, like, my connection, that's like, we could call it spirituality, or my connection has been paramount in terms of being able to choose the life that I want to live, and not to be in that space, as you're saying, of that lie of scarcity, or that lie of the fear being the engine behind what I'm doing, and instead being able to turn that and to be, what are the actions? This is why, conscious action. What are the actions that I can take? What are the steps that I can take? What can I do? I'm focusing on that vision, focusing on, as you're saying, that solution. And a lot of times I see this from every single perspective in our life, for our society. If we go back in time, all of the ancient knowledge, all of the ancient wisdom from all of the indigenous people of all around the world, we have all of the solutions, as you're saying, with permaculture and with a lot of the ways of how we relate with nature, with ourselves, with each other. The solutions are easy or are simple. We overcomplicate them. And I love that. And, one of the things that I really resonate, and this is something I'm going to paraphrase here, because I remember seeing it on the website, that you were talking about freedom, how having that abundance, how having the food forests, and how having the possibility of bringing this into the world is about our freedom as individuals. So can you share a little bit about that, and what does freedom mean, and how does what you're doing bring about that freedom?
Yeah. Ultimately, and this is where I spend most of my presence lately, is the ultimate freedom is presence. No matter what our circumstances are, no matter what's going on, when we are present, then we are free. And here's how, right? The governmente, which just coincidentally means mind control, when we are programmed by our cultural conditioning, by the indoctrination systems that are all around us and part of our world as we grow up, and by other people's beliefs and opinions and values and judgments and all that stuff. When those are running our show, when they're running our energy, when our minds are continuously chattering, we are not in the present moment. And there's the idea, in fact, Victor Hugo said it well 200 years ago. He said, there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. And what's the metaphor for an idea? It's a light bulb. A light bulb goes off, a lightmente, an enlightenment. When you have a mind that is in presence, when you're simply feeling the frequency, the vibration of this moment, then you can get ideas. Now, where do they come from? This is a fun thing to contemplate. Well, they come from somewhere. They come from somewhere divine. If they feel good, if they're a program that feels like scarcity, that feels like fear, or any of these anger and any of these emotions that make us feel fear or scarcity, check it, because it's always a program. It's coming from somewhere in your past, somewhere in the culture, somewhere that you've taken in, you've internalized. When we take a breath and become present and ask with intention the new question about what we desire in our lives, then somehow from some divine place, those ideas will come, right? So the ultimate freedom is presence. And then my question is, how do we achieve mass adoption? Because next level freedom is for me, it's not just when I'm present, but next level freedom is when my family is free of fear and scarcity and suffering and dis-ease. It's when my friends are free of this. It's when the whole world is free of this. And so the question is, how do we inspire and empower, or at least my question, how do we inspire and empower that shift? And when we do, and I believe, in fact, I see it, it's already happening exponentially. The seeds of abundance are already going like this, and there's no stopping this light. It's now a matter of how can we speed that up? Because there are other forces. There's the yin and the yang, the live and evil, which just happens to be live backwards, right? So how do we shine a light on those scarcity moments? One of my friends, his name is Theo Fleury. He was a super famous hockey guy. And he won the Stanley Cup and the Olympics. And anyway, he was traumatized as a young hockey player, as a young man. And he talks about trauma being the root of all human suffering. And he's so right. So to recognize where our traumas come from, and then to release those, to even thank those, and to ask a question around that trauma, what's good about this? When we can sit with that and we can truly ask that question, what did I learn from this? What can I gain from this? What is good about this? Then guess what? If we ask it sincerely enough, the answer will come, and it will probably come with a lot of emotions, energy and motion. It'll probably come with tears. It'll come with a body realignment on multiple levels. And all of a sudden, we'll be able to see clearly by asking those questions.
It's so beautifully said. I work with trauma a lot, and one of the main things that I see is how one of the things I remember one of my teachers who was telling me, and he used, instead of trauma, he used the word blockages, energy blockages, and he would say to me, fall in love with wanting to find those blockages, so that once you massage them and then that energy is available, now all of your full potential, you're closer to that, because all of the full potential is just stuck in those blockages. And, I love that. And I love how, for me, this is where everything for me is related. Everything is connected from this energetic standpoint, from this feeling embodiment standpoint, our mind, and then what's happening outside? How can we like eat and relate and grow things? And all of it is related. Like, this is the thing that I find as well, that our society has taught us to separate things, to create silos and to create compartments. And I'm here, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about like food, and we're going to talk about forest, and we're going to talk about permaculture, and we're talking much more about these topics that are the precursor of that, or how we can tap into that, and why we would do that, and why we should do that. And this is the beauty for me, of having conversations when we go deeper and deeper and deeper, because this is how life is. And the more that we understand what's in my way, and why am I not moving forward, why am I stuck in this box, then once I get to ask those questions, whether I get an answer or not is irrelevant, because now that question is no longer holding me back, and now I can move forward.
Boom. And you nailed something. It's about the new question. Right? It's not about affirmations. It's not about statements. It's about, what is the new question that will free your mind and your spirit and your energy? Ask new questions. Start looking at the traumas and asking the question that's the reverse of the story that you've been telling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so profound. And by the way, there's a lot of science on this. Now, science has been so religiosity lately, but there's a book called Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. She was an MIT super smart lady who found that molecules of emotion, that the energy, that the unresolved traumas of our life literally get stored in the tissues of our body. Right? That's amazing. The psychosomatic connection, it's one thing. So I liked shining a light on the different perspectives of this to help people see and feel. In fact, seeing is one thing, thinking is one thing, but the way through it is through the feeling of it.
Yes.
Right. So to ask the question that gets into the feeling of it, then the expansion goes exponential.
Yes, definitely. And like, one of the things, as we were talking about freedom and about these changes, one of the things that I'm so grateful that I'm able to have this path, because I've been able to learn and to be engaged with a lot of these different perspectives, is the fact that as well, like, from a more tangible place, that I remember, especially through the first lockdowns with the 2020, with COVID and all of that, that I had a garden here, and and I had food here. And it's like, I remember talking with one of my siblings, and he was just starting to grow some plants, and I'm like, I'm so grateful that I have this. I'm so grateful that I'm growing some food. I don't have enough, fully, but I had some. And this is, from that freedom perspective as well. It's like, if I am self-reliable, we as a community and my neighborhood, or as a country, we have that. That's freedom, because I know so many places in the world that if any truck or a train is not bringing food from somewhere else, like, there's no food. And that is freedom as well. Yeah.
It is such a profound freedom. So when I walk outside my house, and I want to paint this picture for everybody, when I share what I've created over the last couple of years, I've noticed some people get envious or jealous or even angry. But what I want to express is everybody can start right now with what you have. Right? If you have $20 and that's all you have, and you need to use that $20 to buy food, then go to the store, or a local farmer's market is even better, right? Find a grower near you, because there are growers near you, right? No matter where you are, especially at this time of year, there are growers near you. And find somebody who is growing some food and purchase that food, and then take the seeds out or use some of that food to start your own food forest, your own garden. So in other words, with a little bit of energy, a little bit of resourcefulness, you could do this with zero extra money. Or if you want to speed up time like we did, you can hire designers and installers, and you can have these things installed for your yard. So like when I walk outside my house, we have about 230, probably a few more now, different types of food all around us. We have about, I don't know, 15 to 20 chickens. And people are dropping off animals. Like a turkey just showed up the other day, a big white turkey. We've got wild turkeys running around everywhere. We got an albino rabbit running around now. We've got it's an amazing paradise of life. And I can walk outside. First of all, I don't have to do any maintenance if I don't want to. Other than feed the chickens 5 minutes a day, feeding the chickens, and those chickens produce over a dozen eggs a day. So 5 minutes of energy input results in a return on that energy invested of a dozen incredibly nutrient dense eggs. And then we've got some cattle, some cows along the pasture. And then we've got a fish pond that we've created. We put 14,000 fry in the pond. They're getting bigger now. And so I can walk out, and now in 5 minutes of effort, now that it's set up, I can have a basket full of food anytime I want. And if I were in Minnesota, then I would want to harvest more food in September and October and store it, either dehydrated or can it or put it in the root cellar, like everybody has always done in Minnesota for hundreds of years. And it's the most freeing thing. And it feels so good. It feels like I'm home.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that, as you're sharing that, a lot of times with, at least here in Auckland, in New Zealand, with the community, there's, you know, community gardens. Not only like I go to the farmers market, but as well there's the community gardens for those that perhaps don't have, as you're saying, like some of us don't have the financial means or whatever it is to start our own garden. Go and share with others, like volunteer a little of your time, and you'll get the food as well, you know. And this is the thing, and this is one of the things in terms of solutions, that sometimes, as you're saying, we overcomplicate things. The solutions are simple. Like I often think, if every school had a food garden, if every, you know, like community, whether that's like a cultural, religious, or sports, or whatever the types of community in their space, if they were growing instead of just having a lawn, which is, as you said, like a lawn, like for some people it might look nice, but it's a wasted space. Like it's not doing anything, and it takes actually energy to mow it, and like, you know, a lot of things. If just a few of those places would start to create that abundance, and as well as a place of connection, is a place of being present with nature, with the flow of life, of how things are growing, to connect with actual real food, which a lot of people, in my experience, like there's a lot of people that don't know what real food is. Like to go to the garden to grow something organically and to actually taste that. I remember a couple of years ago, I was using a co-working space, and I took some greens from my garden, and this guy ate a piece of lettuce. I think, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it ate a piece of lettuce, and he was like, "Oh wow, what's this?" And I'm like, you know, that lettuce? And he's like, "No, this is not that." And I'm like, no, perhaps you have never, like, I think that he had never tasted something not from a supermarket. So it's like, how different that is.
Oh, it's so different. You know, we do tours all the time here in Central Florida. We have our off-grid community is called Galt's Landing, Galts. And when we do tours, and I've done many, many tours, 100% of the people leave inspired. because they, for the first time, some of them know food forestry, some of them have food forests that are much bigger and more diverse than the one we have so far. But 100% of the people see the possibilities for the first time in their life, many of them. And then what they do, the seed of abundance has been planted. Now they just germinate, they add a little energy to it, and now it grows and they start planting. And you mentioned the schools. So, this idea, how do we catalyze a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption of taking the poisons out? Number one is taking the poisons out and not poisoning our lawn, our air, our water, our soil, ourselves. So that's number one. And then using those resources wisely. So that's the big picture. But then how do we reverse engineer that? And the schools, well, I'll share a vision that we have happening very fast right now. We being everybody involved, a lot of people are involved in this, and everybody listening, we invite you to be involved in this. Imagine when our government officials use the resource that is the school. It's an energy system. It's a system that can either suppress energy or it can enhance energy, right? Energy being the energy of our posterity, of the kids. And for generations, it has been suppressing, for the most part, that energy. Imagine when a politician, poly means many and ticks are parasites, right? So I'm not a fan, but I am a fan of good policy. Imagine when a politician starts speaking about and actually acting on taking the poisons out of all the school lunches and the school land, and the students learn permaculture and they grow all of their own food for the school lunches. Now, a lot of people think that that's hard to do. It's infinitely harder not to. Literally, it's way harder to not do this than it is to do this. So now this becomes part of the school curriculum and it's easy to do. So now, and let's say the school is in New York or somewhere where it doesn't have any lawn. That's okay. You've got a park near the school. The students can literally go to the park and they can turn the park into a food forest that feeds the school and the kids and the community. And it also becomes a nursery. So every school, this is what we see and intend to happen. Every school is going to become a nursery that provides massive energy for the community. And we're building a school at Galt's Landing. The primary objective is for the kids to be completely free, to learn to be completely self-reliant. The students of the school are going to manage our nursery and also installations in the community. So the students are going to be the bridge between our community and the outside community. And they're going to help create abundance. They're going to teach classes. And as a result of the value that the students add to the community, they will get paid. In a permaculture world, when we create energy, we obtain a yield, right? The yield can be in the form of money. Now, I believe money is going to very much change over the next 5 to 30 years, right? It's going to go back to real wealth. People say money doesn't grow on trees. No, but wealth grows on trees. Real money grows on trees. So imagine that at scale, that one logical thing would change the world.
Yes. And as well, as you're saying, that different perspectives, especially for the kids, but this is for everyone, different perspective of how to relate to food, how to relate to how we spend our time, how to relate, how do we spend and invest our energy, and understanding, yes, at this moment in time, like sometimes the return is in the form of money. At some other point, it can be different. Like I do so many things on exchange, like without even touching money, because I love that. I love the energetic exchange. I love to be able to do that with people, like find someone that can help me with some communications and marketing and, and I'll do a healing session or, like I'm finding those things. It just makes life so much easier. That's the freedom with like outside of the the survival and the fear of like I don't have enough to pay for all of these things. And when we grow our own food, when we are teaching about this connection, then the abundance mindset, as you were saying, that is what starts to feed, and that enables the kids and everyone to tap into their own gifts and what they're bringing to the world, instead of trying to fit in with everybody else, because we're coming from that place of scarcity. So yeah, I definitely, I love that. And you mentioned just now about being off grid.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? And how can people see that? Because I see a lot of times with some people that I talk through the years, that it feels like, like a very hippie thing to do, or something that you can't really do, or what can you share about that?
Yeah, it's so funny how we've been programmed through Hollywood and all these different media outlets to believe certain things. The belief of anarchy. Anarchy simply means no archer, no ruler. Nobody that's telling me with force and violence what I have to do with my life. In other words, I'm the author of my own story. I don't need an authority writing my story. Right? So Galt's Landing is all about that. It's about demonstrating freedom and abundance and service on every level. And so in luxury, that's the illusion. When I imagine off-grid, I think of a cabin, I think of a lantern, maybe a fireplace. I think of a hard life. I think of a life where I got to work all day long just to live. Right. And then you've got all these shows on TV, Naked and Alone, and all these crazy shows, right? Survivor. And yeah, if you start out with nothing like that, but that's not how it is. We've got community. Community is the key to all of it. We've got a community that has solutions to all of the things that we might not be able to do ourselves, but somebody knows how to do them. So we've got redundant energy systems. We have got redundant water systems, water catchment. We've got dug ponds. We've got a well. We've got, for energy, we've got fuel, and we will be making our own biofuel. And this is mind-blowing. In fact, I'll share a little story with you that it still brings me pause and brings me to intense presence every time I imagine how this is even possible. Our community is called Galt's Landing. Atlas Shrugged. Have you ever read it by chance?
Yes.
Okay, so Atlas Shrugged, there's a character, the point is there's a guy, his name is John Galt, and at the beginning, everybody's saying, who is John Galt? Well, John Galt was a guy that created a free energy device, right? And even that word is a misrepresentation of what the truth is, right? It's not a free energy device. It's just a way to harvest energy from the ether that is not in violation of any of the laws of entropy or thermodynamics or any of that stuff. So anyway, my partner got the book Atlas Shrugged when he was a kid, so he named our community Galt's Landing. I loved it. It made perfect sense to me. Then the owner of the movies Atlas Shrugged is a good friend of a friend of mine who's living on the property. And he said, Jim, he wants us to do something with the movies Atlas Shrugged. So the coincidence that we have Galt's Landing and we have now the producer of the movie Atlas Shrugged, which, by the way, was the 20th best-selling book in the history of the world. I just looked that up the other day on Google or whatever. I was like, oh my gosh, that's relevant. So then 2 weeks ago, I went and spoke at an energy conference with some modern day Teslas, where we were the whole conference was in a warehouse, a studio, a lab, I guess is the best word. And I witnessed these systems in action. So we've got Galt's Landing, we have the show Atlas Shrugged, and we're going to produce a movie, and we are demonstrating these systems, water purification systems that are thousands of times more efficient than what we are currently using, and they can be set up at every home. We've got energy systems that are infinitely efficient. One bit of energy in creates 1.5 bits of energy out. Right? It's all energy's all around us. So now we're putting all of those things together. They have literally divinely just become in our field, and on very well. this is also really important. A lot of people have told me, Jim, you got to be careful. You need a security detail and all that stuff. No. We don't have anything to hide. We are not patenting this stuff. Everything we are doing is open source. It's very transparent. We're not keeping secrets and waiting and hiding and all that BS. We're simply getting information and we're sharing it out there, saying this is these systems in action. This is how they work. So we are demonstrating these things at Gauss Landing. So we will have redundancy on food, water, and energy. And our ultimate joy is the community around us. We're bringing the community in and we're putting our energy into serving the community. And then the community they back us to the max.
Well, that's beautiful. And I love that, because that connection is what also creates and co-creates this beautiful life, is that bringing everyone uniqueness and allowing all of that to be part and to be able to understand, as you're saying, like, I might not know how to do that, but you know how to do it, or that other person knows, and they don't know what I know. So it all fits together. And, as you're saying with that, I was just like thinking, I had once, I was a teenager and I went to one of my teachers, and I remember I went there, and just before I went to have my session with her, and I told her, like, oh my God, this happened. Like, it was so synchronistic, and I was telling her the experience that happened. And she said, well, what if everything is synchronistic? What if everything that is happening and it's just about your perspective? And I was like, oh, damn.
Yes.
Like, that was so true. And when, as you're connecting the dots on all of these things, it's just all synchronistic. But that's the beauty of life. Everything else, if we allow ourselves to see it from that perspective. So I love that, Jim. Jim, I'm just aware of our time, and I could talk with you like for hours and hours and hours. What's one thing that you want to share with everybody listening now?
I want to invite everybody listening now to have fun with us. We're having fun. Like, there's no scarcity in this model. The more we serve, the more we gain, right? It's just beautiful. So I want everybody listening, I would love it, invite you all to just grow food, have fun, serve your friends and family, starting with planting seeds of abundance, ideas and actual plants. And if you want to be part of a kind of an organized strategy and tactics and structure that scales and brings these solutions to the masses, I just talked to some friends, we're putting a food forest at a local prison. And when we put food forests in every prison and the inmates grow their own food, it changes it. Prison reform, you just literally cut prison recidivism by 60-70%. And that's been done before. Like, it's not a hypothetical. So I want to invite everybody listening to check us out at Food Forest Abundance. And pretty soon, Modern Homestead, the Discovery Channel, is putting out a show called Modern Homestead. And we were featured on several episodes, which is coming out here in about 60 days. So if you want to join us, join us. If you want to do it yourself, do it yourself. If you want to create your own entity, do that. And we'll shine a light on that. And let's change the world, my friends.
Yes, so beautiful. Thank you, Jim, for sharing that. So for everybody listening, if you resonated with anything that Jim shared about Food Forest Abundance, or about anything that we've been talking about, because we've been talking about just life in general and the beauty of life. And if you resonate with anything, let us know. Leave us a comment wherever you're finding this. As Jim was just saying, check out the website, Food Forest Abundance. I will have all of the links on the show notes so that it's easy to access. Check out what they are doing. And as you were saying, you're sharing as well the knowledge, you're sharing the beauty of this for everybody that wants to. And knowing for everybody that is listening, you can do this too, at your own space, at your own pace, with your circumstances, your community. Find out what's the starting point for you. So if you learned anything, or if you want to share anything, just leave us a comment wherever you're finding this. And thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your story, for sharing what you're doing, and for doing this in the world, which is needed. So thank you.
And thanks to you too, Brian. I just love your energy. I'm very excited for you to spend some time with me at Galt's.
Yes, beautiful. I will try to see like next time that I go to visit my brother and that he's in Miami. I will definitely carve some time to go there.
I love it. And everybody's invited. We have Airbnbs. People can literally live the life. So thank you, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy, for listening to us, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.